I'm
Yes,
now
sir.
joined by Ben Chuba, a lawyer who served as a co-lead counsel for Johnny Depp in the Amber Heard case, and a former defence attorney who represented Suge Knight, Matthew Fletcher. And interestingly, gentlemen, I think you both completely disagree here. Matthew, let me start with you. You think this is a case of Diddy being railroaded and that the case is almost borderline farcical. Why do you say that?
Well, good morning. I can tell you in hours and hours that from a pharmacological standpoint, that's not possible. This idea that Cassie waits 10, 12 years to file a lawsuit and writes a book and then doesn't turn it over to a general publishing group, but sends it to Jay-Z's lawyer and says, by the way, we're going to put this out unless you pay us millions of dollars, bespeak the real motives behind this. And let me just say this. Puff is not a good person. He's a bad woman beater and he's a coward. I know the guy. Everybody I know agrees with that. But this is not a case about domestic violence. And you can talk about trauma bonding and any other psychological terms you want to lay on there. But the idea that Cassie had her own apartment, had her own money, had her own extra boyfriends or anything else does not speak to me as a traditional victim that we would see in a case of spousal abuse where this is ongoing. And I'll tell you this, when the prosecution told everyone that P. Diddy urinated in her mouth, that was shocking. When Daniel Phillip comes on and says, no, actually the person who urinated told me to urinate in her mouth was Cassie. And not only did she tell me.
See, that's what I'm talking about. The inconsistency of what she said and what actually is being testified now in court. It's just weird. How do you actually don't remember how that
That she gave a tutorial and said you want to do it slowly to make it last longer. At that point in time, the old adage is you can't win a trial with the first witness, but you can sure lose a trial. That lost me, because what you're talking about now is an allegation that this, and I'm going to use its Mandingo stereotype of this crazed black man who's being prosecuted by 5 white women who are saying this man's sexual needs are insatiable and they can have sex for hours and hours.
Yo, this guy is crazy. Who the hell is this guy?
And never rest and always ejaculate. That's not true from the pharmacological.
Yo, this guy's crazy. No, I've never heard him think like this before. Where the hell is Piers Morgan find this guy?
That is absurd. If this was in the 60s or 70s in Mississippi, I think people would be irate. I don't like Sean Combs. That video speaks for itself. The question is, why wasn't he prosecuted for that? The question is, why wasn't he prosecuted for all of these crimes that have allegedly occurred, but we save it all up and we bring it in this case? And to Mr. Busby's point, this idea that the federal government does no wrong in prosecuting people, you know, it's kind of ironic that a Comey is on this case and a Comey also, you know, and he doesn't need my advice, but they told us that President Trump was a spy for Russia too. And that was complete BS, and we know that was. And so this idea and concept that the government does no wrong, federal government does no wrong in bringing cases, I don't think it's true. This is not a strong case. This is a case that if they prosecute it or defend it correctly, and you point out the idea that Cassie says Combs raped her and then she went back to his house sometime later and were having sex, and then her husband FaceTimed her. And she can't remember if she was actually had that man's genitals in her while she was FaceTiming her husband. That's not believable. It's not believable to me. No one would believe that. And it's just part of a long line of, as Busby says, these are bricks. A brick is not a wall, but a brick hits you in the head. A brick still hits you in the head. And like when Cassie says, Combs and his bodyguard went to shoot and kill Suge Knight. That's absurd. Combs is terrified of Suge Knight, terrified, has been terrified of him for decades, going back to a shooting that happened in Atlanta. Combs is not a tough guy. He's not going to jump in a car and go kill Suge Knight in Los Angeles. That's almost laughable. But there's multiple aspects of this case that when you look at factually and practically, it really brings to question, why are we here prosecuting, what was the old adage, sex, drugs, and rock and roll? I'm not saying it's right, but I'm not silly enough to think that there aren't many people who've engaged in sex with rock and roll stars or movie stars and use sex and use drugs. Those are never prosecuted.
Okay.
And Cassie says, I paid.
Yeah, no, listen, I just wanted to bring in, Ben has been listening to all that because it was fascinating. I've got to say, the way you talked through all that. Ben, you don't agree. You think Diddy's going down. Why are you certain of that?
Well, I think my colleague makes some excellent points, and obviously this is going to be a very long trial, so there's much to still unfold. I think the purpose of opening with Cassie, of course, is the video, and the video certainly prepares the jury to conclude that he is capable of committing the crimes for which he's ultimately charged. The problem I had with the cross-examination of Cassie Ventura is this isn't a he said, she said case. There are going to be 3 other women and maybe even another male alleged victim who are going to tell a similar story. One of the second witness has already corroborated another alleged beating of Cassie Ventura. So that's the problem. And I think the government will have, it's not that the government can do no wrong. Obviously, we have seen it do wrong in some cases. But I think the point is that the government would not have brought this indictment if it did not have evidence.
Right. I mean, the track record of the federal government in cases like this is almost, it's inevitable that he goes down. It's like 99% hit rate, right? But they do occasionally get it wrong. But most of the time, if the feds bring a case like this, they win. I mean, isn't that the likelihood here, just on stats alone? I mean, the track record of the federal government in cases like this is almost, it's inevitable that he goes down. It's like 99% hit rate, right? But they do occasionally get it wrong. But most of the time, if the feds bring a case like this, they win. I mean, isn't that the likelihood here, just on stats alone?
100%. I mean, their prosecution conviction rate of the federal government is in 99 percentiles, greater than the odds of being convicted if you're in Russia. Doesn't change the facts that in each case that sometimes you get defense attorneys who know what they're doing and know how to fight it and understand it and take them on. And in this case, what the prosecution is doing is saying that's a bad, mean, violent guy. Look at all of the bad things he does. And they're playing to the stereotype, and they're doing it covertly, but it's fairly obvious to those of us baloney. But that's what they're doing. And they can bring on multiple people they've had sex with. And all they're proving is, you know what, there's a secret. There's sex workers in the world, and there's people who frequent sex workers, but that doesn't really go to the issue. This is a RICO prosecution that was ideally brought to take down the mafia. Sean Diddy Combs is a guy who's a woman beater, and they should have prosecuted him for it, and there's no question about it. But you're telling me with a straight face this is a human slave tract, white slave act case? There's no one who was brought here against their will. Cassie had every choice she wanted to make. They talk about Kid Cudi. Go be with him. Talk about Michael B. Jordan. You know, the reality is this was an incredibly attractive woman, and she was in great demand and had many opportunities to have people. She chose.
Well, he's definitely right in regards to that. She's a very beautiful woman, and she possibly could get any guy she wants. So why would you stay in a situation like this?
She chose that lifestyle.
Knowing that this person is such a monster that you really want to be.
Well, as we're talking, actually, Matthew, I want to bring Ben back here because Dawn Richard, the Danity Kane singer, has been on the stand today and recalled an incident in 2009 where she witnessed Diddy hit Ventura with a skillet and then allegedly threatened both Richard and Ventura Richard testified, he said you could go missing, that we could die. I was shocked but also scared. She said she saw Combs carrying a handgun. She said Combs' bodyguards had guns too, keeping them on their lower back. I mean, to Matthew's point, Ben, I mean, he's obviously a very bad guy. He's obviously a woman beater. We've seen that with the video. He likes guns. He likes to threaten people, all of these things. But in terms of what the feds have actually gone after him for, racketeering, sex trafficking, and so on, Matthew makes a good point. This was set up for the mafia. This was the kind of stuff that when Rudy Giuliani tried to go after the mob, this is how they did it. And some people do think that they've just overreached in what they're going for him for on this. And for that reason alone, a jury might be persuaded to acquit.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Matthew and you both make excellent points, and that may be what ultimately happens. But we're at the beginning of a very long trial. And one of the things, as Matthew knows, is if you're a prosecution or if you're just putting on any kind of case, you want to keep the jury interested. So there'll be sensational testimony, as we've begun with sensational testimony that prepares the jury for the.
So, guys, tell me what you think. Do you guys think P. Diddy is gonna go down, or it's early times? Well, I actually think it's looking good for him so far. There's a lot of inconsistency in regards to both witnesses, and I know it's early stages, but let's see what I have to bring, guys. Thanks for watching again. Please hit the like, subscribe, and catch you in the next one. All right.